Hello, it's time for another episode of Vibes of the Universe. Let's begin with the strongest geomagnetic disturbance of last week. It took place on 4th of November around 21st UTC. In some stations the strength of Earth magnetic field dropped by 500 nanoteslas. Problem is that in Canada the story is absolutely different. Comparing the Canadian charts with the European one, only strength seems to be similar, but the timing is absolutely different. Canadian magnetometers were probably affected by the impact of coronal hole frontal density wave. Problem is that the same disturbance was recorded as well in Europe, in the difference to the second, much stronger jolt, which appears to be absolutely local. Anyway, the disturbance was for sure felt on a bigger area. In UK, the K index reached 5 during the second impact. Here we can see nicely how the particles from the fast solar wind density wave enter the current ring and compress the plasma sphere. This monitor shows electrons at -1 kV. Equatorial connection remained open all the time. Those are protons at 1,7 kV. Notice that there is much less of them and their behavior is different. Low energy field flux tube is visible all the time as well. Now something more disturbing. Look how the plasma pressure affected the electron cloud in Ionosphere over Europe. Some of my subscribers should remember this monitor from my older movies, as I was recording it pretty often, but I'd never seen such huge density of electrons over Europe. However, it seems that the electrons started to freak out over different parts of Earth as well. Anyway, the explanation of such huge electron density at higher latitudes doesn't surprise me that much. It's just another sign of the magnetic poles migration. Particles are now partially adjusted to our new perpendicular equator. But let me show you an animation of electron cloud over northern polar cap. Look what happens just after noon. A dense stream of particles passes right above the pole. I am almost certain that it is the main cause of Arctic ryometer disturbances which are being recorded every day in last couple weeks. For some reason, the low energy field started to be interested in South America. Look at the behavior of electron cloud while it passes over this continent. If you wonder about the effect of those anomalies on our environment, look at the water vapor images right over the same spot. If you think that I have to be crazy if I tell that our magnetic poles will move to current equator, look at the polarity of Sun, where such process is already taking place. Sun has currently two positive poles and both are placed on the equatorial belt. Okay, but let's go now to the main topic of this lesson. Current ring discharges and equatorial magnetic connections. I need to warn you that the subject can be rather hard for beginners. If you didn't watch my movies before, better be armed with some basic knowledge about space weather interactions between electromagnetic fields. Actually, I'm not sure if I understand completely the entire process. Fact that energetic particles are disappearing from the inner magnetosphere was bothering me for a very long time, especially if we look at the frequency of those discharges. In last couple days, current ring is losing most of its particles at least once each day. On this monitor, electrons were discharged twice during 12 hours. It would be much easier if the interactions would follow the same pattern all the time. But in this case, the situation is rather dynamic, and just when I start to think that I began to understand the process, rules change in a matter of days or hours. So I have to forget about everything what I've learned before and try once more. I've started to make my model by making only one assumption, that the entire solar system is affected by another magnetic field which is constantly draining positive charge from planets and the star. I've called it low energy field, as its electric potential is much weaker than in the case of Heliosphere. Soon there will be 2 years since I started to make my movies, and during this time I've learned a lot of additional properties of low energy field. It was more than a year ago when I've learned that the main magnetic orientation of this field is tilted by 90 degrees towards the ecliptic plane, and it's trying to push our magnetic poles to the equator. I don't even remember when I started to talk about the equatorial flux tubes connected to the ionosphere, but I didn't change my mind since that time. Of course, I've made many mistakes since I've started to record. Ask D5 UNCR, he knows about each single one. But sometimes I'm really surprised how many of my ridiculous claims was confirmed on those monitors. Of course, most important is the fact that I was wrong about the time. Disturbances are not growing in strength as fast as I was afraid they will. What means that the process of depolarization can take longer than couple months, and we still have some time till the things will get rough. But enough of this crap. Let's get to the point. Since the beginning I was sure that the flux tubes which are making those huge holes in our magnetic shield are the main cause of current ring discharges. And since the beginning I was sure that those magnetic field lines are not connecting us with the Sun. Why? Because the main magnetic component of the heliosphere is supposed to be BZ, north-south orientation. That's why all Earth-Sun interactions say about particles passing through the polar cusps during geomagnetic storms. That's why auroras take place over our magnetic poles. You won't explain those anomalies using the current space weather model from NASA. as those connections take place at different angles. In the case of low energy field, Bx and By seem to be stronger than Bz. Besides, in Earth-Sun relationship, Sun is always the side which gives the energy, which causes auroras and storms. Energy of a star is much bigger than ours. Sun is charging us with additional power, while those field lines are causing outflows of particles. Those tubes have simply nothing to do with our star. Of course, the connection with low energy field can be tracked in the ionosphere, but I talked about it many times before. Now it's time to talk about the variables. If you watched movies which I've recorded couple months ago, you should be able to notice couple differences in some of the patterns. For example, the main equatorial tube was clearly interested in the Philippines, and the attraction was strong enough to overcome the Earth rotation. Flux tube remained connected to the same spot, while the electron cloud was moving further. This caused the tube to stretch itself. Now, the same process is taking place next to west coast of South America. And I have no idea if tomorrow it won't happen over Africa. But it's just a tip of an iceberg. When we look again at the current rings, we'll notice that the angle at which the tube connects itself to the Earth changed as well. Bottom monitor shows how the connection looked like 2 months ago, in September. But let's make it more funny. This is how the current ring looked like during the autumn 2011. That's what I meant when I was talking about the changing rules. Here, the rules are being made during the game, and there are no judges. 1 year later, in 2012, current ring started to behave in more rational way. But notice that the equatorial flux tube is rotating together with the ring. In 2013, the shape of flux tube became obvious. However, low energy field wasn't still strong enough to keep the connectivity point in one place. It still moves with the current ring particles. It seems that NASA should be glad that someone started to research this anomaly soon after it started to appear. You won't find any information about this connection besides my research. Of course, it's just a tiny part of those changes. Just look what was the neutral gas temperature 3 years ago. Both polar caps were much warmer than the rest of ionosphere. Even the ionospheric plasma was acting differently in 2011. It seems that a modern astrophysicist who wants to be on top with current events has to be like a bullet-dancing marine soldier, move smoothly and adapt quickly to every environment. Of course, I'm not an astrophysicist and I can walk freely over unsafe and unknown grounds. Let's leave the limits of officially accepted science to professionals. Being an amateur can be a big advantage. For example, when we compare current readings with the ones from September, we will notice easily that the angle of flux tube connection changed in last 2 months. As for electrons, so for protons. By coincidence, my 3D model predicted it couple months ago. The change of flux tube angle is probably caused by motions of the planets. Earth and low energy field move along their own orbits, and interactions between them have to change depending on positions of interacting bodies. And this allows me to make a small guess as for the position of low energy field source. Although the difference is rather small, you should be able to notice that during last 2 months the angle of flux tube connection shifted towards the day side. Electrons at 2,8 kV are the best ones to point out the directions. This data can be easily used in my 3D model. In the beginning of September, the angle between dimension X and line connecting Earth with Sun were close to reach 90 degrees. Just like here. 2 months later, the same angle is much bigger, as Earth is close to finish its orbit once more. Now all I need to do is to add the directions which I've learned from current ring monitors. And we have another coincidence, as my model don't need any updates to match with the new directions. Of course, my model is rather a sketch, but it explains perfectly the changes in the angle of connection. Anyway, this is how more or less looks our current situation, according to my 3D model. Around March 2015, Earth should be placed on the opposite side of solar system than the source of low energy field, whatever it actually can be. For the end, let's look how the ionospheric disturbances affected the cloud formations over Southern America. First, look at this cloud, which doesn't behave normally for sure. And here's a second example of electromagnetic forces affecting the atmosphere. Okay, that's enough for today. Class dismissed. Be safe. Peace.